Hey, what's up? It's Scott. There's a lot of adversity right now in law enforcement. If you are thinking about getting out, or if you made the decision to get out, but yet you don't know exactly how to pursue another career or what job to pursue, or heck, even if you're not in law enforcement and you're wondering whether or not you should get into it, you do not want to miss this interview with professional consultant Lynne Garrison. She is a member of one of the world's largest organizations when it comes to leadership, the John Maxwell team, and she is a very successful entrepreneur, and she will give you solid advice, concepts and principles that you must master and act on in order to make a calculated decision for yourself and your family. Let's get right to it. So my first question is this: what solid indicators are there that it is time to look for a new job?
So, Scott, I really think you have to do some external looking and some introspective looking before you try to think about that decision. There's a lot of data that needs to go into that decision, and it's very human and it's very personal. So, if I could, I'd like to offer three quick keys before you make that decision. The first really is to consider, what you're doing to take care of yourself before you start to think about leaving the profession. I mean, obviously you got into the profession for a very personal, passionate reason. So before you start to think about leaving it, think about what you're doing to help yourself, to take care of yourself. And we can talk more about that if that's an area you'd like to delve into, Scott.
Okay.
The second thing I would suggest is talking to others. And by others, I mean talk to your family members, talk to your friends. Ask them, am I acting differently? Am I acting stressed all the time? Am I angry all the time? Or am I good? What's our relationship like? Has it changed over time? And then talk to other officers who have left the profession and find out, well, why did they leave? And how are they feeling about it now? What do they miss? What do they regret? What do they love about what they're doing now? And then maybe also talk with some officers who are in the profession like you. Ask them how they're feeling. What do they love still today about the job and the profession and the protecting and serving that they're doing? So talk with others. And then the third key is to think about yourself. Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? Is this work getting you there? How do you feel about the impact you're making? You know why you got into the profession. Is that passion still there?
Wow. I think we can end with that. No, I'm kidding. that, wow, that was very dynamic. It's obviously a tough time in law enforcement right now, and there are
Mhm.
blanketed statements made all across the media that don't really help someone in their mission. However, I just don't want any officers to make a rash decision based out of fear or anxiety, and then they end up regretting it.
Scott, there is so much stress, especially now, but there's always been a lot of stress in that
Yes.
profession.
Yep.
It's just really heightened right now.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make a rash decision. You want to make a decision rationally. You want to think it through carefully, and you want to be sure you're taking care of yourself because it's tough times. And there's a lot of professions that have a good amount of stress, but it really seems off the chart right now for police officers. So it's really important to think it through carefully.
Oh, absolutely. And hence also to take care of yourself and make that time to take care of yourself. Just like you said in point number one, we've kind of touched on it briefly. When someone is thinking about leaving a job, what are some things they should stay away from? Like leaving it out of fear. There are red flags like, no, you're not making a good decision based on yada, yada, yada. What's your advice? Like if someone's thinking a certain way, what should they avoid thinking about in the decision process?
When you're stressed or when you're burned out
Hmm.
or you feel like you're not making an impact, that's when it's really time to stop and pause and not make those rash decisions. Don't jump. You feel like you're in the fire, but sometimes you can jump out of the fire and just land in a worse spot or land in a spot where you're not fulfilling yourself. You're not able to fuel yourself and your passion. It's really important before you take that step to really think it through carefully. One thing I like to do, one thing I like to suggest to people is to think about what drives you, what motivates you, what fuels you on a day to day basis. And then on the opposite side, what drains you? What is it about your current work or your current life or anything in your life, externally or internally? What is it that drains you? And so, where are you today? Are you mostly being able to live into what drives you? or are you mostly living into what drains you?
Wow, that's incredible. I'll be honest, what drains me most of the time, the news, I think for anyone is not good to watch consistently throughout the day. So when you talk about something that can bring you down, I think for anyone, really, the media is one of them.
As I was talking recently I was doing a training with a group of police officers, and one thing that one of the individuals said is that we all get painted with the same brush. There's always going to be some people who don't have the right perspective, don't have the right approach. You find that in every profession. Some might call them bad apples. We all get painted with that same brush. And so it's important for our own mental health to not watch that stuff, as you're saying, Scott, not listen to that. There may be some social media channels that's important to stay off of. Maybe there's some people that you've been following who have this real anti police bias. Maybe it's time to unfollow those people. But really pay attention to what you're consuming outside of the job and to make sure that it's fueling that energy, that passion, that positivity. And I'm a big believer. Police officers, the work that you do is phenomenal. It is off the chart, but you got to have time to recharge.
Yes.
So maybe it's spending time with the family. Maybe it's going out with some buddies and spending some time just getting away from it all. And
Yeah.
if you come home and, like you said, Scott, if you watch the news and see it all play out in front of you in some other part of the country in a negative way with protest and unrest, that certainly is not going to help your mental health.
I'm glad you addressed that. That was good information so far as have a getaway from it, have a way to escape.
Yeah.
And that is not blocking anything out. That is an active
Right.
way to cope. And I'm so glad
Right.
you brought that up. Let's just say a police officer is like, no, it's time. I need to get out for the sake of their health, for the sake of their family, whatever their calculated
Mhm.
decision may be. I do pray it's calculated. What should they consider so far as what the next step is, what field to go into, if that question makes sense?
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. And we all deal with that when we start to look at what's the next thing, especially if we're looking for something outside of what we're doing right now. It's not just looking to move to a police force in another town or whatever. You're looking for a career change, if you will. Again, it pays to do your homework. I start with that, what drains you and what fuels you. What drives you, what drains you, because you want to be sure that what you go into has the components that are going to drive you, fuel you. There's a number of surveys out there. There's a number of talent surveys. I use them in my career coaching practice because I find it really helpful for individuals to really take a close look at themselves, what their behaviors are like, what drives them, what are those forces that drive them, because that in itself sometimes will reveal some good information about a profession that they hadn't thought about. And then that's the time to do your research. Talk with people who are in that profession that you're considering, see what they love about it, see what they don't like about it, and think about the demand for it in the area in which you live. So, for example, if you don't want to move, you need to survey, do like an environmental scan of what are the job availabilities in your area. If you are willing to move, then that opens, a whole nother horizon. But I do advocate for getting some help. It's a big endeavor. And so if you can get a career coach, if you can get someone who can help you navigate in a structured kind of way, a process to go through, it's huge. And the final thing I would close with, Scott, is really all about relationships, because even if you identify that ideal next career step for you, it's hard to get a foot in the door without that relationship. So, getting out, spending time with those that compiling those connections that you've built through the years, and then spending time talking with them one on one about their advice for you, what and you sharing what you're looking for, and asking for their help. It takes help, it takes relationships to move to that next step.
You're absolutely right. And I remember you told me that before, and that's how the new opportunity happens. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, networking is huge. For those law enforcement officers still in, retired cops. Speak to the retired cops that have taken on other careers. For those cops who have gotten out and are happy with their decision, with the opportunities and the new jobs they have landed, to those still in, talk to those police officers who have gotten out and have found
Yeah.
careers, ask them, are there resources out there to help people network and or look for that new job?
There are resources out there. It is helpful to have a career coach because they can help you navigate those resources. But look in the communities. There are all kinds of meetups now that you can find online that's in your community. There are chamber groups that will often have networking events that you don't necessarily have to be a member of the chamber to participate in. There's other community groups. Look for areas that you already are involved in. So if you're already involved with an organization or you have some connection with an organization. Maybe a spouse or a significant other is involved in a community organization. Start with people that you know who can
Okay.
help you get in that door, but really take advantage of every opportunity that you can. I'm a part of a professional association that held a networking event last week. And they asked me to come in and talk about cultivating relationships. So they began that networking session with a talk on cultivating relationships. And then we moved into the breakout room time where you could do some virtual networking, et cetera. It is a bit different right now in our almost post COVID time. Much of the community still is operating virtually or in a hybrid kind of way. But sometimes that has real benefits. Sometimes it's easier to get on someone's busy calendar if you're going to do it through a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call where they don't have to leave the office, go to a coffee shop, meet you, talk for a period, and then come back to the office. That actually takes more time out of their calendars. So
You're right.
sometimes it's easier virtually, but the one-on-one connections really make the world of difference.
You're right. And this is all very helpful. Thank you so much. To those who are networking in that process, like, how do you make yourself marketable?
So that's a key step as you think about the next career step, because what you have to think about is what are the skills that you now have that can be transferable to a different job, to a different career. Because as you work on that resume, you're going to need to lift up those skills, lift up those experiences that are transferable to that job, to that position that you want to get into. Because especially when you're changing professions, if you simply put on there your experience in law enforcement, but you're actually looking for something outside of law enforcement,
Mhm.
they have to understand first what the skills are that you built during your law enforcement time that are transferable to that new profession that you seek. And again, that's where the relationships help, because if you're talking with someone who's in that field, they may be able to brainstorm with you to help you identify those skills that you have identified that are prime material for that new job.
Okay, great information. So focus on skills. When a company asks about weaknesses, I know we're supposed to be honest, but how can you say it without being like, oh, when them saying like, oh shoot, we shouldn't have started with this person at all.
Well, that weakness question is always one that trips people up. And you have to think about it ahead of time, because if somebody asks you what your weakness is and you're pausing and you can't come up with anything, that in itself sends a wrong signal.
Oh,
So
right,
it's
true,
something that
yeah.
you have to think about, and you want to come up with something that is a weakness, but maybe you go on to talk about how you have learned to overcome it. And maybe it's a weakness that is not a deal breaker in the position that you're looking for. Let me give you an extreme example. So, if you were looking for a job in finance and you said your weakness was you're just not good with numbers, that probably is a deal breaker, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
you want to look for a weakness that is real, especially one that you can talk about that you have learn to overcome or to cope through, but also one that's not a deal breaker in the position that you're looking for.
Okay. Well, that was enlightening. I'm glad you said that. Not that I'm looking for a job, in case my boss was watching right now. Not that I'm looking for a job. Anyway, this is for other cops out there. What are some specific websites or networks that people can join or look at to see what jobs are available out there? What sites would you recommend?
Well, the first one I would mention is LinkedIn has this host of job opportunities. Recruiters are always trolling through LinkedIn profiles looking for specific types of people. So, yeah, I'd start with LinkedIn. But there are a number of there's support groups in communities. Some of these organizations that are tied to specific professions have job boards that list organizations that are looking for job. They're looking for a position, looking to hire, if you will. But I'd start with LinkedIn
Okay.
and look at your LinkedIn profile and make sure that it's up to date. Make sure that it reflects the skills that are going to help you get that next job in that next profession that you're looking for. And again, that's another place where a career coach can help you because they can give you feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you recommend Indeed.com?
Indeed.com is great. And you can set up your profile to where it will send you positions that it deems appropriate for what you're looking for. Now, you're always going to find a number of positions in those emails that they send you that really aren't on point. But every now and then there'll be one that really is on point. So Indeed.com is an excellent one.
Okay, great. When someone does find that potential employer, what should they look for to see whether or not it's going to be a good fit? If, say, they don't know anyone in that company, obviously the recruiter is not going to be one to be entirely transparent. They're trying to recruit. What would you say? If they don't know anyone, what would you say for them to look into whether or not it's the right fit?
Well, of course, check into their social media, follow them, see what their social media looks like. You can always go to Glassdoor. I think it's glassdoor.com. There are generally employee reviews there. Just remember that oftentimes the people who are going to take the time to post a review may not be the ones who love the job there. So you may find more negative reviews, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't people there who love it. They just haven't
Right.
taken the time to post a review. But it certainly is helpful to look at glassdoor.com and search for that company that you're considering to see what people say. If nothing else, it may spark some questions that you would like to ask the recruiter or ask the hiring manager if you get that chance for the interview. I have found, though, even if you don't know anyone in that company, I have found cases where people have been able to send connection invitations to people who are doing something similar to what they're interested in that company. And some will accept, and some will hear a message. If you send a message then saying that you're interested in the company and would love to learn more, some of them are readily happy to do that. So it's
Great.
worth giving it a try. It may
Yeah.
not be successful, but it certainly is worth giving it a try to reach out and achieve some new connections that are within that company.
Outstanding. That goes back to what you said. It's all about building those relationships and networking.
Yeah,
I don't think that can be
exactly right.
emphasized enough at all. Well, this has been very helpful. If an officer is really thinking about getting out of the profession just because of the additional stress or whatever it is, I really hope that you watching this video or listening, you really can make a good calculated decision based on the information that Lynne has provided. Lynne, for those who do want more resources, more of assistance with making the decision, yay or nay, whether or not to stay in it, or the help with finding that next job, how can they find you?
Absolutely. Reach out to me at any point. The easiest way is by my email, lynne at garrisongroup.org.
Okay. And I will leave a link to that in the description box of this video.
Great.
One last question I have. This one's not going to rub everyone the right way. There are police officers that I know who have at least 15 years until retirement. And, there is that retirement package at the end of the career. However, they have several years to go and they're miserable. Would you recommend someone staying in a job that they don't like, all for the sake of collecting a retirement package?
Everybody's individual situation is different, without a
Absolutely.
doubt. If they go through those 3 steps that I listed at the beginning, that will give them good information. I do have to remind folks, though, life is short. We get to live life once. There's not a redo here. If, for example, you're in a job and you're not able to spend time with your family, you don't get a redo on that. Just consider what's important to you. Work through those 3 steps that I mentioned at the beginning, and then make a very careful decision. It certainly wouldn't hurt to consult a financial advisor, but in the bottom line, in the final analysis, if you're not happy, if you're miserable, and if that is showing up to others that you love and hold dear, you have to ask yourself, is that worth it? Scott, there's a quote that I love. If you don't mind, I'd love to share it.
Go for it.
It is, look closely at the present you are constructing. It should look like the future you are dreaming. And that is from Alice Walker, who was the author of The Color Purple.
Wow. Well, we'll leave it at that. That was a great quote to end on. You've been very helpful to all those who need that extra assistance or just looking for a new career, or whether or not you want to think about it. Hey, Lynne's here. She is here for you. We're going through a lot right now, and there's a lot that you have to consider rather than just running away from something and then maybe regretting it. But there's also other opportunities out there in life, and we only live once, just like Lynne said. Lynne, thank you so much. This has been very helpful.
Thank you, Scott. It's my pleasure.
Do not forget to secure your copy of the book, 101 Health Tips for Police Officers. The link to get it is below.